Okay everybody, this is Lord Jackal, and today I'm going to discuss something that you guys have asked for a while. But not just that. I've actually decided that what I want to do is tackle the entire story mode in a two-parter special, talk about different aspects in the two parts. And today's video is going to be not just about the bosses, but also about the enemies. Just the generic enemies that you fight throughout the game. So, here we go. Let's do this. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the bosses, which is kind of a big thing. One of the most memorable things about any fighting game is the big fights, obviously, and bosses are kind of the biggest fights in the game. Now, when you're picking bosses, it's important that you pick a character that's not just important, but also a character that kind of fits the role of a boss. In Brawl, they kind of did well with characters like Rayquaza and Ridley, and a lot of the original ones that they made. So the question is, how many of those do you bring back? And how many do you try to bring into the game as newcomers? I know a lot of people want to see Ridley as a playable character, so I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, I would rather not reuse any boss battles from Brawl. So don't expect to hear any of them. Even Taboo, I don't really want to reuse any of the boss fights. The interesting thing about the bosses is they haven't all come from Nintendo franchises. A lot of them were original creations, which is good and bad. I mean, the reason that we play the game is to see Nintendo characters that we like, and to, throw them all together into this big melting pot of fighting, action, and crossover crap. I'm just gonna keep saying meaningless words until you get my point. But on the other hand, it's kinda cool to see some new things brought into the equation. I mean, if all we used were purely Nintendo characters, we'd kind of run out of enemies and bosses pretty quickly, wouldn't we? I still think SSB4 should have some Nintendo-based bosses, and so I'm going to talk about a few of those. First off, another Pokemon boss would be fantastic. I don't know if any of them can really hold up to what Rayquaza did. That's one of the things. Rayquaza was interesting because he was a legendary Pokemon, but the way that he moved, he wasn't just like a big Hulk. You know, he wasn't like Groudon or Kyogre, where you couldn't really maneuver them the same way that Rayquaza could, but you could still do it. But I've been thinking about what the best legendary Pokemon would be to fill that spot, and honestly, I kind of think it'd be cool to go with the legendary birds from the first generation. That or second generation. I feel like fourth generation's legendaries, for the most part, wouldn't really work too well. I mean, you've got Palkia and Dialga and Giratina, all who are very, very big. And while you could do that, it doesn't feel the same as having a fully maneuverable boss, the way that Rayquaza was. And I think the legendary dogs and legendary birds are some of the best ways to go about it. I haven't played too much of the 5th generation yet, I've actually just started it, but I don't really think Reshiram and Zekrom match up in terms of, being maneuverable. So I really think the best choices would be some of the legendary birds. The first 2 generations, because after that they just got hulking. That aside, you still could fight Palkia, you still could fight Zekrom, you still could fight Kyogre. I just don't think it would be as exciting of a fight as fighting somebody that's more maneuverable, somebody that's harder to hit. That's just me, though. I think out of the Kirby series, which does have tons of bosses, the best one would be either Dynablade or Dark Matter. Obviously, they'd be in very different capacities. I think if Dark Matter were in, he should be one of the bigger bosses of the game. He would be one of the more... He'd be one of the masterminds, basically. Whereas Dynablade could be just a minion boss. Dynablade would be very interesting, very different from Ridley, which is the closest boss I can think of to Dynablade. Yeah. That's essentially what I think. I think if you're going with a Kirby boss, Dynablade's the best choice. Tons of representation, very recognizable among Kirby fans. It would just be a fun fight. I really do think that Zelda has a plethora of characters who would fit this role very, very nicely. I don't mean people like Girahim, because I feel like the way that Girahim's built, he's less of a boss character and more of either a playable character or an assist. I just don't feel like he has the feel of a boss to him. Even though he was a boss in Skyward Sword, I think he's better suited for other things. However, they have a whole lineup. They have Aghanim, who could be teleporting around the map, shooting balls at you. You've got Vaati, who has his transformations, who has wind magic. You've got Onyx and Varen, who also definitely feel like bosses to me. Onyx and Varen could go as a team. You know, who knows? I think that those four are probably the best choices from Zelda, if you go with the Zelda boss, which I know that we didn't have one in the last game, but if you want one, I think those are the best choices. I've thought about putting in Bellum or Demise, something like that, but I don't feel like they have the same feel. I feel like they would be better. Well, I guess kind of the way of Dark Matter. I feel like if Demise or Bellum were involved, they would be one of the bigger bosses that might only be a story boss and not even really a boss that you fight. But yeah, who knows? I'll talk about that more in the second part of the video. Something that I thought would be really interesting, if Little Mac's in, it'd be fun to have a fight against King Hippo. Because, you know, he wouldn't really work too well for a playable character just because of his dimensions, the way that he moves. He wouldn't really fit the fighting mechanics well as a playable character, but I think he'd be awesome as a boss. You just make him a little bit larger than he actually is. He could be really fun. I mean, why not resize? He's pretty gigantic in the first place. I think it'd be a fun boss, but chances of seeing him incredibly slim, it's really just my own mind getting away from me. With Ridley going, do you look for another Metroid boss? There really isn't any other boss that I feel fits the same way that Ridley did. Kraid and Mother Brain are just kind of big, and I don't think they could maneuver I don't think they could maneuver well enough for a boss fight. Maybe Kraid. You may be able to do something with Kraid, although he wouldn't be moving much. You could theoretically make him work. You could always bring Ridley back, if Ridley ends up not being playable. But I would really like to see Ridley as a playable character instead of a boss. And I think if you go with another Metroid boss, Kraid's the one that makes the most sense. I don't think Dark Samus works very well. Yeah, Mother Brain's too big. I think it would have to be Kraid. Earthbound. Porky worked awesomely. I think it'd be cool to see Porky come back in another form with another machine in some new way, because Porky's still kind of the best representative they have to fill a boss role, I think. I thought about trying to fit Gygus in there, but I don't think there's a way. Well, I mean, there is a way to do him, but I don't think it would really fit his character that well, because, I mean, when you fight him, he's kind of like an entity more than he is like a solid form, and I don't see Gygus working that well. You don't really need an Earthbound boss in the first place, but regardless, if there were still an Earthbound boss, I really would like to see Porky back, just with a different machine and a different capacity. Now, there's the possibility that a lot of the bosses could return too. Not just Porky, not just Ridley. They could bring back Petey Piranha. They could bring back Duon. They could bring back anybody. I'm hoping that they don't. I'm really, really hoping that they treat everything in the next Smash story as completely new and original. I want to see them keep innovating. I want to see Sakurai take things and do new things with it, which is something I'm going to talk about more in the next video. But regardless, I really would like to see some more innovation in the way of bosses. And this moves us on to enemies. I think one of the biggest criticisms that I have about Subspace Emissary is just how bland the enemies felt, I guess. And it's not just that they were bland, because they did come up with some original designs, but it didn't feel like I was playing a Nintendo game, really. Because the only enemies that they brought in from the actual Nintendo games were like Koopas and Goombas, you know, and Hammer Bros. And I felt like you have this huge, like, just database of Nintendo characters with their own enemies that you could pull from and put into this world, and you aren't using them. You know, like, why don't you have space pirates in the Subspace Factory? You got Ridley there. Why not have space pirates? They could be so fun to fight against, because they might maneuver like playable characters. But you know, because most of the enemies are kind of just like brawler enemies. You know, they didn't really move too much. They had fairly simple patterns. If you're fighting space pirates, give them some AI. You know, put you in like an arena with 3 space pirates, and that could be a really, really fun fight. I think I was most disappointed in the fact that they didn't have any Zelda enemies in there, because in Melee, they had used them, and they were so good. Like, you had the Redeads and the Like-Likes in the adventure mode, and I know that there's more you could do. You could do Moblins. I mean, you had Ganondorf as a main boss. He could be sending out goblins. Not goblins, Moblins. You've got you could use Master Hands. Think about what you could do with the gameplay there. There were so many things you could have done with Zelda enemies, and they didn't do it. I thought it would have been really, really cool if, for Marth to have gotten from the castle to, you know, across the land, he actually had to fight enemy soldiers. You know, I thought it was kind of weird that he was by himself in this castle that was obviously, like, war-torn. Like, there should have been something else there. I feel like having generic soldier units could be pretty awesome. If you have, like, if you have a couple levels set in Fire Emblem's kind of universe, make it so that they're fighting through a war. You know, have some of the Lagoos there. Have mages. Have archers. You could have, like, an entire... You could make an entire game just built around that. Just a Fire Emblem brawler. You could do that. So why not have a couple levels where you do that, you know? I also think that Pokemon has a lot to contribute. We had all those levels that took place in jungles and such, in caves. Why not have Zubats? Why not have Beedrills? Why not have Rattata? Why not have all of these kind of generic Pokemon that are known for popping up all over the place? It would have done so much to help with the immersion factor, I think. Now, as I said earlier, Mario's really the only franchise that's kind of covered when it comes to having enemies, but there's still more you can do. Well, what if you had like a level where you had the angry sun from Super Mario World, or from Super Mario Bros. 3 chasing after you? That would have had a whole nother layer of intensity, wouldn't it? What if you had Cheep Cheeps jumping up after you as you were crossing over bridges, have water levels? There's so much inspiration you can draw from these games, and really that's why I think we need to have enemies from the other franchises. I mean, to me the game felt like it was taking all these Nintendo characters and then putting them in a generic world, instead of actually creating a universe where all of these Nintendo characters like existed together. You know, we have these generic locations like jungle and cave. Why not make it Jungle Japes? Why not have Kremlins in there? Why not make the cave like why not make that Mount Silver? You know, there's so many things you could do to bring all these worlds together, and I feel like enemies is one of the biggest ways to do it. Tie these enemies in with the world around them, and you would have a much more memorable game. At least in my opinion. I think Subspace Emissary would be so much more memorable if it actually felt like you were playing through, like, a Nintendo Dream World. I'm really hoping that this is one of the things that Sakurai is working on with the next game, because he's talked about how he wants to improve what's already there. I'm really hoping that's what he does, because I think that's the next step up that the story mode needs. I mean, he gave us a Kirby-style brawler, a Kirby-style side-scrolling brawler for a story mode, which isn't surprising because it's Sakurai. And honestly, I was really surprised we didn't see a lot of Kirby enemies, because they're perfectly fit for the style of gameplay, because that's what Kirby is. You know, why not have Bronto birds flying around? It's totally... It fits. It just fits to have Kirby enemies. It fits to have any of these enemies. You could bring it together. You can do it, Sakurai, so do it. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the other aspects of the story mode. I'm going to talk loosely about the story and what sort of things you can do with it. I'm going to talk a lot more about the map and about kind of other side features. Probably more about the stickers. But mostly, I want to talk about kind of the thing that I mentioned earlier, because I don't know how to keep my ideas separate. This idea of taking this world and really making it a Nintendo world. That's a basic overview of what I think about bosses and enemies. I didn't get a lot of specifics because, honestly, I care less about the specifics and more about the feel that they're going for. It's less about specifically what gets in, and more just about making this feel like a memorable experience, making it feel like this fantastic realization of Nintendo glory. You know, because that's what it should be. That's what Smash should be, is a celebration of all of Nintendo's history, all of their separate franchises, all of their fan bases brought together into one game that, you know, glorifies everything. And I feel like the enemies and the bosses are kind of where Subspace Emissary missed on that. So, tell me what you thought about this. If you agree, if you disagree, if you think that we should stick with generic bosses, if you think that I should stop making videos and quit YouTube, if you think that I should dye my hair, let me know. I will get back to you. I promise. I'm a very good listener. See you guys in the next video.